Hi, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. Today, we are joined by Dr. Jessica Zucker. She has a really special story. She's going to talk about her miscarriage. She's going to talk about her breast cancer diagnosis. And she's going to share this with the wisdom that I know she has within her. She's an incredible teacher and truly a change maker. She is the award-winning author of Normalize It, Upending the Silence, Stigma, and Shame that shape women's lives. And her other book, I Had a Miscarriage, which is a memoir, but it's also a movement. She's the creator of the viral hashtag, I Had a Miscarriage campaign. Her work has been featured across major outlets, and I'm so grateful she's here with us today. You are going to really get a lot out of this conversation with Jessica. Before we begin, I want to gently acknowledge that today's conversation is touching on the profound and sensitive topic of losing a child. So if you or someone you have loved has walked this path, parts of this episode may feel deeply emotional and potentially provocative. Please listen with care and pause whenever you need to. Joining me now is Dr. Jessica Zucker. She is a psychologist, award-winning author of Normalize It and I Had a Miscarriage. She's the creator of the hashtag I Had a Miscarriage campaign. Welcome to my podcast, Jessica. And you know I'm going to ask you the obvious question. What is this I Had a Miscarriage campaign all about?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be in conversation with you, and thank you for all that you bring to the world of parenting. So, as you mentioned, I'm a Los Angeles-based psychologist, and I specialize in women's reproductive and maternal mental health and have done so for over 15 years at this point. And I come to the field with a background in public health. I worked internationally in women's reproductive rights and health. And at the time, I was just passionate about all things women. And I had not gone through something specifically in my own life or in my own body that sort of took my career in that direction until I did. So I was 16 weeks into my second pregnancy when I had a miscarriage while I was home by myself. I was instructed by phone by my OBGYN how to cut the umbilical cord and promptly began to hemorrhage. All the while, my husband was darting through LA traffic, trying to get home to me. And my doctor suggested that we bring the fetus in a bag to her office for testing. And we got there as if things could, get any more sort of traumatic and dramatic and documentary-like. I was then faced with yet another horrible situation or choice, if you want to call it that. I either had to undergo an unmedicated DNC or I could wait for anesthesiology and then have a blood transfusion. And so I just figured in that moment, I don't know that I had sort of access to my full self. I wasn't really thinking clearly because of this trauma that was unfolding before my eyes. But I felt like, can there be more psychic pain than this? Can there be more physical pain that I've already endured? And so I decided to have the unmedicated DNC just to move things along. And I will never forget the sound of that machine and the pulling out, the tugging of the placenta, which really symbolized the end of this pregnancy.
Wow, Jessica. It's just so brave of you to talk about it. And I know it's vulnerable making. Can I ask some naive questions?
Please.
Okay, because I don't think we even realize what can happen to someone.
Yes.
So you're 16 weeks pregnant. How did you have an umbilical cord? Can you tell us in as much detail as you're comfortable?
Yes. I appreciate you asking. I feel like most people sidestep these vulnerable questions because it makes them so uncomfortable. So I really appreciate you wanting to know. Yeah. 2 days prior, I started spotting and I went to see my doctor and the heartbeat was fine and the placenta was where it should be. And I just had a gut feeling. I just sort of felt like there was no coming back from this. Although, there are times in pregnancy when people bleed and it can be okay. But I just got the sense that something was amiss. And the night before I gave birth, I was roiling in pain. And I now look back and I realize I was actually in active labor. So that morning, I took a bath, I called my doctor, and then I actually reached out to a, neonatologist, a specialist, wanting to get a second opinion, not because I didn't believe my doctor fully. I believe in her wholeheartedly, but I was just so desperate for answers and for some semblance of what is about to happen here. Like someone needs to kind of be with me in this unknown journey. And that's when I started to I was getting myself dressed to go see this doctor. And I started to feel almost like I was having an anxiety attack, which I'm not familiar with in my own life, but I was kind of spinning a little bit and I felt nauseous. And so I just thought, well, let me sit down on the toilet and get a cold compress and just steady myself. And that's when the fetus fell out.
It fell out into, you were sitting on the pot?
Yes. And so, but you're connected, by the umbilical cord. And so the baby didn't reach the water, but I just looked down and was like, wait, what? Like, this is not supposed to happen. I had been sitting across from women and families for years, hearing about the pain and the anguish and the feelings of isolation and alienation following miscarriage, pregnancy loss, infant loss, SIDS, the whole spectrum. Never had I heard of something like this. So I just did not understand what was going on. I was fully unprepared, both emotionally, of course, and even, intellectually. I just didn't know this was possible. And so luckily, I texted my doctor and she called me straight away and she insisted on staying on the phone with me until my husband got there. The thing is, once you cut the umbilical cord, the blood does not stop until the placenta comes out. And the placenta, I guess, could have come out on its own, but mostly I think needs to be sucked out. And so I couldn't get up. People have asked me countless times why I didn't call 911. And the truth is, it was such an intimate crumbling of my life as I knew it. The last thing I could imagine was letting complete strangers, huge men, I would assume, running through my home and being there while I had this fetus dangling from my body. None of it sort of made sense. And I felt compassless for maybe the first time ever. I think that's what trauma can do.
Wow, Jessica. So then you had the unmedicated DNC and your whole life must have just come to a standstill. There's just no way to process this. It takes eons. How many years ago was this?
So that was in 2012. And the truth is, I didn't feel age was on my side. And my doctor recommended that we wait 3 cycles before trying again. And I could have waited a lot longer than that if I really gave myself the space to feel my feelings and actually grieve. But I didn't feel like I could indulge that in a way, which is an interesting thing to say as a psychologist, right? It's like I was very aware of the fact that I was in some ways sidestepping the depth of my pain in order to sort of forge ahead and hope to create another being. And so I got pregnant straight away. And then I don't think I took a deep breath until my daughter was born, And so in some ways, it kind of squished my pain in a way that was untenable. I expected to feel like this enormous sigh of relief when she was born, when she was earthside. But I'll never forget, she came out quiet. My son had come out screaming. She didn't say a peep. And so I assumed, because my fear was at the ready, that something was amiss, that maybe something was not okay after all of this. And again, because of my work, I had all of these stories of difficult experiences lodged into my psyche and my cells. So I wondered, is this a stillbirth? Did something happen during the birthing process? Is she not alive? And it was then that I realized, and I get really into this in my first book, but I had imagined or I had expected or hoped that my anxiety would dissipate upon her arrival. And I learned the hard way that it didn't.
Right. But she was okay. Everything turned out she was okay.
Yes, she turns 12 next month and she's wonderful and hearty and joyous.
Oh my goodness. So you began this movement, hashtag I had a miscarriage. Why did you feel the need to do that?
Yeah, so I found for me, and I get into, this in my second book, Normalize It, upending the silent stigma and shame that shape women's lives. I get really into this notion, that when we keep our stories inside, they can morph too readily into feelings of shame, right? When we're silent about the tough stuff, when we succumb to the cultural stigma, this can sort of bundle up and become this very difficult place inside of us. Like, ooh, what is wrong with me? Am I bad? And as you know, that's kind of what shame feels like and looks like. And I don't know, I felt a true fire within me soon after my loss, feeling like, you know what, I have to do something about the fact that women are reporting feeling a sense of guilt and shame and self-blame and even body hatred in the aftermath of pregnancy loss. I just have to do something about it. I mean, I didn't know what and I didn't know how, but I had already experienced through writing that this is such a beautiful conduit for sharing our stories and changing narratives, right? And so, of course, I'm a huge believer in therapy because I'm a therapist myself and I know how revolutionary it can be. But I also found through writing a deep connection with women around the globe who understood these feelings too well. And so the truth is, I didn't want to sort of go public with my story until I was on the other side of pregnancy because I was just feeling too raw and too vulnerable during my subsequent pregnancy. So it was in 2014 that I launched the I Had a Miscarriage campaign with my first New York Times piece. And in it, I'm essentially detailing what I just shared with you, my personal story. But then the second half of the piece is really a call to action. Can we, as a culture, once and for all, bid farewell to the sort of zeitgeist that is laden in this hush-hush requirement? Can we flip it on its head? Now, not everybody needs to start a campaign or get on, a rooftop or a TED Talk stage. Of course not. But if people are feeling any semblance of shame about something that they had no hand in, I'm trying to compassionately invite them to think about it differently because we're so used to the what if cycle, the anxiety cycle of, what if, being so kind of negative and self-effacing. And so what I was asking is, what if you had no hand in this? What if approximately 1 in 4 pregnancies results in loss and you did nothing to deserve this?
Wow, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, we'll have more of Jessica's incredible, brave story. How did you come to releasing guilt and shame for yourself? What did you tell yourself to get there?
It's interesting. I didn't feel those feelings. I still wonder about it to this day. Why did I not go to that place? Now, number one, I think it's because I had a healthy child already. So perhaps I sort of had that feeling of security of like, I've been pregnant before, I can do this again. And I also come from a family of medical doctors. So I think I sort of went to it, the scientific place, which was like, a majority of miscarriages happen because of chromosomal abnormalities. That's probably what happened here. And that was the reason we did find out. And so I didn't go to the place of self-blame or guilt. But what was fascinating and incredibly troubling was some of the platitudes that came my way almost urged me to feel those things. not consciously, not on purpose.
They probably said things to you like, oh, it's not your fault.
Yeah. Or just, at least, you can get pregnant. At least you're young. At least you already have a healthy child. And it was sort of like, wait, you're simultaneously minimizing the extent of my pain while also trying to kind of stave off the pain points. It's like I'm fascinated and very sort of worried about the societal fear of sinking into or leaning into pain with our loved ones, right? So we are not taught to talk about grief. So people are actively trying to stave it off, minimize it, focus on silver linings, trying to get us to think about the good things in these moments. But why do we need to do that?
Right. On one hand, we catapult into this
Yeah.
overwhelming, catastrophic guilt and shame. And then on the other hand, we platitude positive psychology it away. The middle is that it is traumatizing and tragic and very, very challenging. And it is scientific and things go wrong. And our body is a machine at the end of the day with all these millions of cells. Something can go wrong, nothing to take personally. It's that middle place of and without going to these extreme outlier places. You don't have to flog yourself and flagellate and go into this abyss.
Yes.
Or you don't have to just, tra-la-la it away. And it's that middle, the straddling of the middle that I think people have a very hard time with.
Exactly. Like, can't we hold both? Can't we be in pain and also be grateful for what we have?
Yeah.
So when people try to make us choose or focus solely on silver linings, it really robs us of the nuance that is being human.
Yeah. I think it's a very interesting manifestation of our ego. So the guilt and shame is, oh, it must be me, my fault, it's my body. Why can't I be an amazing mother? Why am I? Which sounds self-flagellating, but it's full of the ego. And then the other
Yes.
one is, oh, I deserve a better, happier, joyful, pain-free life. So let's just look at the bright side, look at the bright side, look at the bright, it's both of them are exceptional. I'm exceptionally at
That's
fault,
right.
or I'm exceptional, so I deserve a better life. Versus, I'm just a human. My body's going to go haywire sometimes, no big deal. Just like the miracle of a birth
Yes.
is that things can go wrong. It's just scientific.
Yes. No, I so appreciate your perspective. I really experienced that when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I felt like, a lot of people swarming around me or saying things like, well, you're a warrior, you've got this, you're so strong, you're going to beat it. All of these words that are so warlike. And it didn't occur to me that it was lifestyle related or that I had done something to deserve this. I felt like actually, if the statistic is, I think 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer in their lifetime, why wouldn't it be me? Of course, I wish it wasn't, but it was also just this sort of humbling moment of, yeah, of course, we can become statistics if we live long enough. And that is the human experience.
Wow, Jessica. I mean, you are just, overpouring with this wisdom. How did you become so mentally strong to not go into one of these pendulum swings? How do you find yourself centered like this and being willing to experience life as it throws you its volleys?
Well, that's a really generous compliment. I'm not sure that I don't do the swinging, but when I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which was just 2 weeks after my first book came out back in 2021, so during COVID, I went to my bed to lay down. It felt very extreme. I was so taken aback, and the thought of leaving my children motherless was the first thing that came to mind. And I decided, though, just like what you were saying, so many people go to the the ego, like, I'm going to survive. I got to beat this. And instead, I decided it was important for me to go to the darker corner, to investigate what would it mean to die? Why are we so afraid of death and dying? And what I came up with, which I mean, I haven't looked at the research on it, but I'm guessing that it's there as well, that most people feel this way. It's like we fear pain, I think, the physical pain, and we fear non existence. But what I ultimately came to in this kind of existential crisis I was in was the fact that, like, my kids not having me worried me most. But the idea of death, I finally realized was a place of peace.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I wanted it. Of course, I was going to do everything I could to remain here and healthy. But I think that our grit and our gratitude and our resilience and our vulnerability comes from allowing ourselves to go to these very hard places rather than trying to just always stay in the light and, keep things hopeful. And, I think it's okay. I think it's okay to let ourselves be scared and afraid.
Wow. I mean, this conversation is so much deeper than I thought. I mean, you are just teaching me so much about surrender and acceptance. And I will never forget this conversation because the image of you on that toilet is going to stay with me. And now your breast cancer and lying down in bed and then going to those dark places, that is it. You have been there now. I mean, I don't think there's anything left for you to be afraid of. You are someone who has literally lived it, embodied it, and come back to tell us how to surrender to our lives and to be in flow. So you are such a gift, and your story is such a gift. And I hope that more women and men turn to you and listen to your wisdom, because you have a way of expressing things that are so real. You're not trying to hide, you're not trying to make it pretty. And that's why I knew I could ask you those difficult conversations. So bring us to today. What would you say are your core principles of your values of life today?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say a core principle is being present. And also, I mean, I did write a book after cancer, and that was quite a journey. And, I think it's easy to get pulled into some of that sort of comparing and contrasting, especially on Instagram. And, have I done enough? And that pull to kind of think that there's more accolades to achieve. And I'm really trying to give myself grace and be proud of the things that I have accomplished and not focus on the things that I haven't. And to really revel in what it's taken to get here, right? And I love that my career trajectory incorporates true vulnerability. A lot of psychologists don't really share about the contents of their lives, but I feel like what I'm sharing is hopefully inspiring for others. And again, it just makes me human. I don't want to be on a pedestal. I don't want to be seen as somebody who's untouchable, or, oh, because she has a PhD, she must be this way or that way. No, like the opposite. I want to show people that we can be strong and tender simultaneously.
Oh my goodness, Jessica. Wow. Yeah. What I'm learning from today's conversation is, we can surrender with grace to the most turmoil, to the most tragic, to the most torturous. And there is evolution there. There is growth there. There's wisdom there. And that you are an embodiment of that human who has been through things that would seem unsurmountable, but you have surmounted them, and you've done it with such open heart and vulnerability. So thank you for the work you do. Thank you for the books you write. Thank you for the honesty you share, and for just opening your life up like this. And as a therapist, I think we want to go to people who have been through the darkness and come out the other side. When I wrote my book, A Radical Awakening, in my divorce, I really had this imaginary fear that people would recoil or turn against me, or who wants to listen to somebody who's been through so much? And actually, the contrary happened, right? More women opened their arms, more people embraced my teachings. And I think it's the same for someone like you. Because you shine the light with insight and grace and wisdom on the most horrific of life experiences or our fears in the most brave way. You actually give permission to us. And that's what everyone is looking for, is permission to be human. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your story and for allowing us to be a witness and to walk along with you.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me and for all that you do and all that you are.
Wow. I mean, that conversation really hit me because what Jessica has been talking about are some of our greatest fears. And the grace with which she has gone through her journey and shared its wisdom with us and shared its teachings is just so moving to me. So I'm sure many of you listening are feeling some of those feelings right now. So take care of yourself. I know it was a lot. And thank you so much for tuning in. This is what these podcasts are about: sharing, learning, growing, evolving, and embracing what it means to be human. So I hope you learned a lot from today's episode and share it with those you think it could help. And I will see you on the next episode of Parenting and You with me, Dr. Shefali. Parenting and You with Dr. Shefali is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional medical, psychological, psychotherapeutic, coaching, healthcare, or other qualified professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment.